start with, well, thank you for that introduction. Now I feel like the pressure's on. The room is full. I have not ever spoken in front of this many people, so I'm just a gardener. So we're all, and I feel like that's why we're here today. And we're just gonna share this moment, appreciating our passion and learning from each other. So thank you for coming. We appreciate that. Most people probably have a PowerPoint to go along with exactly what they're saying. I did something different. I just wanted to show the beauty of the flower fields as we're talking about keeping that flower color in your own landscaping in your own yard. So what am I gonna do here, Brett? Yeah, I'm not. See, there should be a play button, not 3 dots. I just hit myself. That's a win. Let me make sure it's going. There we go. Okay, so it's just going to circle pictures and stuff, and I'm just going to start yapping, okay? So I was going to start with a little introduction for the flower farm, but Tim did a great job. I will add that as I started this, it was more of, yes, I have a growing background. We always had 2 acres of vegetable garden. Growing on a large scale was not odd or anything. It wasn't until John was about ready to go into school and you ask yourself, what are you going to do? Are you going to get a 9 to 5? That seems so weird now. I had the privilege of staying home with the kids. So that was about the point where I seen Florette Flower Farm. Has anybody ever heard of Florette? Yeah, so I seen her mass flower fields come across my social media feed, and like, what is this? And what is a flower farmer? What's a flower farmer? So here she is introducing her flower farm, which is in Oregon, and showing us how she does successions of crops. So she has a steady supply of flowers to 1 sell in her CSA, and then 2, she also supplies grocery stores with local flowers. And I just knew, like, that is something I want to do. So not only was she showing inspirational pictures, but she was then offering an online flower farming course. So that is how I got started. We put everything on paper, kind of a business plan, fall of 2019. We put some feelers out there. Hey, here's some veggies and flowers, and at that point it was just from our yard. Who would want a weekly supply of this? And the response was overwhelming. We had customers before we had even put anything in the ground. So if I didn't, I mean, that's great to have that, and as a business, absolutely, you have to make money. But I knew even before that this is what I was going to make a go out of it. Brad is my grounding source. He keeps me grounded. I'm a dreamer by nature, natural dreamer. And Brad also does make sure that this business is turning a profit with the charts and the numbers. So thank you for that. But I know you all came to listen about how to keep the color in your yard all season long. And maybe some of you already have some of that, or you struggle with certain areas of it. Now this is becoming dull. What do I do over here? So it is a really expansive subject, but we're going to touch on kind of what I found helpful when I was doing that. So, like I said before, even before I became a flower farmer, that was one of my goals. Is I just wanted my yard to look spectacular. I wanted color in there all the time. And not just with annuals. Annuals, you buy it at the greenhouse nursery every spring, and after that frost comes in the fall, they're done. Once and done. So they usually do bring a bunch of color for us, but I wanted not to spend all that money every single spring, so that's when I got into the perennial garden. So the packet that I passed out today, the first sheet just shows a little bit of what we have going on our own flower farm this year, some of the events coming up. And then behind that, I listed out, and these are all perennials. This is not inclusive, okay? So just keep in mind, this is the varieties that I have listed on here are just the tip of the iceberg for our choices, even in Zone 5. So It's something I'm hoping that everybody walks away getting inspired after we talk about that today. But if you're anything like me, you're kind of like, wait, what did she say? So hopefully this is something you can keep referring back to as well. And I love to geek out about flowers, so anytime you guys want to contact me and just pick my brain about flowers, I love that too. So, let's see. I think the first thing I wanted to touch on is our hardiness zone. So we're in zone 5. Zone 5 is also broken into zone 5A and B. So actually, we're from Lancaster, Wisconsin, the southwest corner of Grant County, and that is specifically considered 5A. If you're ever wondering what zone you are, you can always look that up, USDA website, and you just have to type in your zip code. It will bring up your hardiness zone. So, but unless you traveled from a couple hours away today, most of us will fall under that zone 5. And that means that in the wintertime for us, the minimum average temperature is about -20 to -10, minimum average for our wintertime. It also means that our frost days are about from late April to beginning mid-October. So that leaves us with a 150-day growing season, which to a lot of other zones is pretty minimal. So those are some of the challenges for zone 5. Speaking of zone 5, when you guys do go to buy your plants, whether it's perennials, shrubs, trees, always take a look at their tag. Make sure it says hardy to zone 5. When I was okay, I'm gonna give my age away a little bit here, doesn't matter. But when I was growing up as a teenager, we were still in zone 4. So things have changed. So at least the tag should say zone 5. If it says zone 4, 3, 2, 1, those are all safe as well. Those are colder zones than we are in, so they still will survive in our zone. That is saying too that we all know there can be colder winters than -20. We all know that people on the ridge get a lot more wind than we do. So just keep that in mind as you're going out to choose your plants too. So, sorry about that. I did have a paper because I do tend to go down a lot of rabbit holes, and sometimes we're just going to end up talking about teenage kids. That's what's going on in my life right now. So, that is our growing zone, hard enough to survive. That's great. So, choosing the right plants. So, one of the things I found, you think, I'm going to get into gardening. I want my yard to look like that. I just want everybody to keep in mind that it is a process. Unless we have a big sum of money that we want to invest right now in professional landscaping and advice coming from somebody already experienced in that industry, gardening and building your landscape, building your yard is a process, a slow one at that. So not just gaining the knowledge of what to do with our plants, but also like acquiring those plants. And I always found it the most fun to acquire them from local plant sales or a plant swap. Those people can tell you exactly what to expect from those plants. Our nurseries and greenhouses usually do a good job, but it depends when you go there. They might be too busy to even talk about what plants you're picking up that day. So just give yourself grace. It is a slow process to build the landscape. Oh gosh, that's just that loud. Okay. So we're going to start with spring. The season of awakening is how we describe it. And that's right now. So the first official day of spring was what? Thursday. And we woke up this morning at 23 degrees. So happy spring, everybody. So in our zone, still pretty chilly, but we can see everything slowly coming to life. And the more thunderstorms we get and rain that comes down will slowly bring that frost out of the ground and let even our spring plants wake up. So the spring for us brings tulips, daffodils, crocus might be some of the first ones you see peeking out of the ground. Those are all considered perennials for our zone. So the tulips and the daffodils do, and crocus. Certain ones that come up so early in the spring are planted in the fall. A majority of you guys in here will know that. But I still have some people calling me this time of year saying, well, I just saw your tulips are going to come up. Where did you get them? And I want to put some in my yard. So not realizing that they do need to go through stratification, a really long cold period, in order to present such beautiful blooms in the spring. So Tim always reminds me, you have to tell the tulip story, So here we go. On our flower farm, we've always grown tulips for the earliest blooms, our daffodils and tulips. And that usually comes late April, early May. Now, I will say, and that's great, that's right around Mother's Day. So that is one of our biggest holidays as a flower farmer, too. But there was a year that it was such a cold spring, we didn't have any blooms until the day after Mother's Day. So it's kind of like getting a pallet of toys in to sell for Christmas the day after Christmas. So Mother Nature's in charge. There are things we can do to speed up our bloom time as a commercial grower. That year we weren't there yet. I think that was only our second year in flower farming, and we were just letting it flow. Whatever happens, happens. So there are things like that. You can kind of ebb and flow with your business. But we started out growing on my parents' property. We have now graduated onto our own property up right outside of Lancaster there. And we still use that Mount Hope field for pumpkins and gourds, but now all the tulips and all the flowers are on our land. So that's nice. So we're typically putting in between 9,000 and 10,000 bulbs to supply our subscription bouquet service that we offer. We're in Madison every Saturday morning around the Capitol. That's the Dane County Farmers Market. And that is the biggest producer-only market in the whole United States. So keyword, because you're like, that's not the biggest market. Keyword being producer-only. The people who are running those booths are actually the farmer. They're the producer, which is really unique. You can pick their brain, you can learn a lot, whether it's flowers, beef, pork, vegetables, honey. You will see, I feel like, the best of the best up around the Capitol on Saturday mornings. So a really good one to attend. I think they give us maybe 3 substitution weekends every season. That means that booth can be run by somebody who doesn't own a stake in your company. So that's about how many tulips we started with. So a shipment of tulip bulbs come in. It's a pallet. Becky, who works for us full-time seasonally, her and I had those tulips in the ground in a couple days. And when you think tulips, you're probably thinking poking a hole 6 inches deep, covering it. As a cut flower farmer, we are using a 5-foot tractor bucket and scooping out trenches, and we're putting those bulbs in there. Yes, by hand, everyone gets touched, but egg carton style, imagine. Where we are now, because of the uncertainty of the land when we first started growing there, we did a 100-foot by 4-foot wide raised bed, and that's where most of our tulips snuggled in for the winter. So put them in. It's a gorgeous fall. I started going full bore on porch pot workshops, which is something was also new for us last fall. And they started going crazy. Everybody wanted to make their own porch pot. Well, before I knew it, there was another pallet on my driveway. And I said, Brad, I'm not sure what showed up today, but it's supposed to rain. Let's get that in the garage stall. Still super busy with the porch pots. A couple days later, I go check. I'm like, what is this big old pallet here? Here, I knew I had a couple varieties of tulips that were back ordered, but here they went and duplicated almost my entire order of tulips. So like I said, we were kicking around the idea. We're always looking forward, right? What else is next? What else should our flower farm look like? What fits in our family life, too, which is complicated. We've got 4 kids, and they're in a lot of stuff. So burnout always comes as a flower farmer, and also trying to let the kids have their own time, too. So what does the future look like? But I was always like, I want a small tulip vest. Don't think Pella, Iowa. It's not going to be there. But after planting that second round of tulips in the ground, we had 30,000 bulbs in the ground now. So that's going to be more than enough to even supply some of our extra weddings that we have coming up this spring. So I said, Reverend, if we ever needed a sign that says, yes, you should have a small tulip vest, here it is. So we are very excited, and I'm not going to I don't like to sugarcoat things. In a certain way, being the first time we've ever had a tulip fest, it's going to be what it is. We can think about we can try to have all of our bases covered, but you don't know until you get in there. And then when you find out what didn't go exactly how you wanted it to, you learn for the next time. And it is very similar in our own yards and gardens. Just give yourself grace. When something doesn't work out, keep at it. Get in there with your hands. I mean, the only thing that really holds us back at a certain point, if you're just really building your yard, is I just spent $15 on that perennial, and now it's dead. I'm not sure why it's dead. I don't know, was it disease, was it pest? I encourage you all just to keep pushing forward. Try it again, try it again. But hopefully some of the things I have to say today will leave you inspired to just keep at it. So back to, that was your tulip story. Enjoy it? I'm sure you'll hear it again. So what's in front of you today, the varieties that I decided to include on your paper is a couple of different things. So they're all perennials to begin with. And then some of the key things to remember is when we're building our landscape or building our yard, for instance, for me, what I was doing is I was building on the inside of a fence. It was a very nice fence. It wasn't like I didn't want to see it, but I wanted color there. So one, you're talking about height. You want your tall, medium, short. Short being either maybe 8 inches tall or even a ground cover. And then you're also thinking color and bloom time. So as I'm saying all these things, it can sound overwhelming, but when we put it these are the key notes that I need to keep track of. And you kind of want to focus on one area at a time. So tall, medium, short, even if we're talking about all perennials. And that's kind of how I broke it down on your papers today. So I think I listed, here's what will be blooming in May, June in Zone 5. That will be 8 to 12 inches tall. And then I gave you another group that will be 24 inches or taller. Now keep in mind that those varieties just the tip of the iceberg that is our options for Zone 5. There are many options out there. But this is something that will hopefully get you started, and you can look up those varieties and see if it's something that you would like to put in your yard too. So looking at height, we're looking at bloom time. So there's specific varieties that thrive in the cool weather. Their roots actually need that cool soil to thrive. And that's a lot of our perennials and some of our annuals too. So I didn't include a list of annuals on here today, but keep in mind, that's what I do to keep that color going in my yard. I want a good mixture of perennials, annuals. Some people are blessed enough to have room for trees, shrubs. So the layering effect, knowing your bloom time, and knowing how to take care of those plants too. So there is, I kind of said this at the beginning, this gardening in general is such a complex subject. I could talk about bugs, I could talk about disease, I could talk about compost, I could talk about how fertilizer, but today we only have so much time, so I am going to just tell you some key points of what I kept in mind as I was building a very colorful border. Maybe touch on a few of those things, but not in depth. So just keep that in mind, that there is a lot to learn, and you'll learn those just by experience too. And if you don't know the answer, talk to your neighbor who does the gardening. Call us up. There's lots of information on certain social media forums too. All the people that have shared the same passion of gardening, we can learn a lot from each other, but just throwing a question out there. Somebody will most likely throw an answer back at you. So spring, the varieties, you're like, I might be a little bit limited, but actually if you get looking at the perennial varieties for spring, there's quite a few of them. One thing I wanted to mention about tulips too, and I didn't know this for years, but even when I was putting tulips in my own yard, and this was before flower farming years, they'd come up, they'd bloom, we'd enjoy them, and that was about it. Like I knew that I wanted to leave my foliage there to die, let it turn real yellow before I even removed it from my strip there. But I didn't know something that was going to keep my bulb really healthy for longer, which is, if any of you have tulips in your yard, it blooms, the petals fall off, and now naturally that plant is signaled to send the energy up to the top of that plant and produce seeds. So we don't really want that. We want that energy that is going to be created from absorbing the sun and the nutrients in those leaves to go back down to that bulb for next year. So cut your stem off. When your petals fall, cut your stem off. Leave the leaves alone. Let them get yellow and die. A lot of us just tend to, and I was included, I always had black mulch. I wanted black mulch because I felt like that makes my colors pop even more. And when my tulips, and I had a whole line of them, started dying, all of these yellow leaves and brown, and it looks gross, I just got them out of there at that point. But I encourage all of you, if you want to have really healthy soil and you want to keep amending and building that soil, to leave that on. And if you don't leave it on your landscaping for display, then at least gather that, the dead tulip leaves, and put it in your compost pile. That is all pure gold richness for us to keep building our soil. So wherever you're starting, if you're starting in your yard, if you're just starting, I have the side of the garage I kind of want to dress up, I encourage you all to even take a soil sample and see what you're working with. If you need help with that, you can always contact your local extension office, or maybe your master gardeners will help you send in some soil samples. And then at that point, tell them what you intend on growing. Are you intending on growing a fruit tree, just flowers, vegetables? Because all three of those will take different nutritions from your soil. So if you say, I want to start an orchard, and this is my soil sample, they'll tell you what you need to get to, like what your pH is, what do I need to start that orchard? Or if you're just getting flowers, maybe your soil is right at that pH where it needs to be. So let them know what you intend on planting in that space, and then those results that you get back, they'll also tweak that. Like if you're going to be growing perennials, here's what you need to get up to par. So that's very helpful too, because in my mind, the secret is always in the soil. And we're always amending our soil, even though it's on a much larger scale. We're blessed enough to have the city of Lancaster, when they collect their leaves from around town in the fall, most of them are mowed, go into dump truck loads. We had 10 dump trucks of mulch leaves brought out to our place last fall. And so I'm like, this is pure gold. Like, look at my compost pile. They're going to have a great start. We use them a lot for mulch on all of the tulip beds. And I pay those guys for their the fuel and their time. And to me, that is completely worth it. They also bring, the city of Lancaster has a city compost. And after a while, with all that stuff, they keep turning it and they work it. But if there's not enough people coming to get that compost, it just piles up. So when they have extra of that, they bring it out to the farm. And that is not a hot process that they do, so I know that I'm open to whatever is coming from everybody's yard. And we're prepared to handle that by being proactive with some of the stuff that we do at the beginning of our season. Whether it's neem oil you spray on your plants to try to be proactive before the bugs even show up, that kind of thing. So we're just very thankful for it, because if you go to buy truckloads of compost, Purple Cow compost is a really popular one. It goes through a hot process. It's so nutritious. It's quite expensive, and I know there's nurseries around here that might carry the Purple Cow by the bag, but if you're looking to get it by the truckload, I think the closest one to us might be Verona, Wisconsin. So then you're also paying for shipping. But if you can get good compost, or you make good compost, that is really the base and kind of like the secret of having a good crop, no matter what you're growing. So, all right, so then we move into summer. Summer brings more bold colors and more plants that are heat tolerant. So keep in mind, there are tons of hybridizing methods that get done to achieve some of these really neat varieties around here, a lot of which I'm even drawn to. But if you are looking to have plants that are a little bit easier to take care of, when you go to your hardware store or your nursery or your greenhouse, ask them if they carry native plants, because that might be a good place to start. Our native plants are native to this zone, native to this area. And so all of our weather changes, hot, cold, dry, wet, this is where those varieties started. So if you want to get started, ask for some native plants that may not take as much of your attention and may not be considered what I like to call finicky. I have plants in my yard that I'm like, you're just being finicky. Like, stop being finicky. But I love them. I still love them. So it's just what you can handle and what we all have time for. You know, time is precious. So native plants is always a good idea. Let's see. Yep, tolerant of hot temperatures. So again, always look for zone 5 or colder on those zones, or on those, the tags on your plants. But I think that, again, I listed out some. Here's what is going to be blooming in July, August, and this is the height that they're going to be, whether they're short varieties or tall varieties. So again, our tulips are now done. Now I have a blank space. What am I going to do until even my early perennials are blooming? So a lot of times I like to say it's our height, it's our bloom time, and it's the layering effect. So I say the whole inside of a fence, but that can be overwhelming. So let's say you just have a 10-foot stretch. Your tulips came up, they were blooming, they were beautiful, and now they're done. So whether you cut them off and put all of the foliage into a compost pile, which will help create another batch of compost that you can then again put into your bed, or you just left them there, you're still left with a blank spot, right? What am I going to do until maybe you have a couple perennials in there, but they're not ready yet and they're not blooming yet? So I encourage everyone to maybe even just get a 6-pack of very colorful annuals from the greenhouse at that point. By that point, the danger of frost will be over. So even if you popped in marigolds and patience, and then this takes us to where are they? How much sun are you getting in that spot? How much shade are you getting in that spot? So that's also what's going to determine your choice of plant in that area. So your tulips are done, your perennials aren't blooming yet. How are you going to do that? Definitely go to your greenhouse, put in, something that's not going to last probably to the end of the summer, but it's going to be colorful for now until your perennials start blooming. If you don't want to do that, or you don't have time to do that, pots. Planted pots are always a good thing. Maybe not the huge ones, they're hard to tote around, but even our 14-inch pots that are standing just 12 inches tall, move them over into that 10-foot stretch for a while until your next plant is blooming. Or garden art. Stick something in your yard that is colorful until the next batch of your flowers are blooming. So we've been in different houses throughout the years, but at one point it was a rental that we couldn't till up anything. It about killed me. I'm like, what do you mean? There's so much room back here. Why can't I have a walk-behind tiller? No. Can't do any of that. So I did a ton of vegetable gardening in containers. I actually made my own self-watering containers, and they were all around the house. I'm like, I have to have vegetables. I have to have flowers. And here we go. There's another method. And I knew that was a temporary situation. But I remember getting red flower pots that year because I said, I need pops of color. So pots, I mean, they're everywhere, in all shapes and sizes and colors. So get yourself some bright pots, and maybe that's not your taste either. Maybe your taste is more subtle. Get yourself some pale blue pots. Just something to add to your landscaping, or that 10-foot section is kind of what I want to keep referring back to, because some people don't have a whole fence line they're trying to fill. Get yourself some pots and add some interest for a while until the next flower is blooming, or until your landscaping is mature enough to go from one season to the next, because it does take time. So the papers that I'm sending home with you today will help you. Here's the season, here's the height, and this is how I can place them. It'll help you get started. But until those perennials are put into the ground, and some of them they won't bloom the first year. They'll bloom the second year and on until that root system gets developed. So there's other things we can do until we achieve mature plants in that 10-foot section. So then we can move into fall. And naturally, the landscape around us is changing colors. So like I said, if you're blessed enough to have room for trees, your trees are naturally changing, the leaves are changing colors. I encourage anyone to add in shrubs or bushes too. So not just for varying heights, but different interests as we go through the season. Whether, like the forsythias are, well, there's different colors out there, but I always have a bright yellow one. That's right away in the spring. A lilac, a hydrangea, different things. Those are taller plants if you've got the room, but they'll bring the early interest. So in the summer, most of my color came from my taller annuals or my perennials. And then when they were about leaf, then that was about the time where my fall shrubs kind of kicked in. We had a few burning bushes there. Then my asters were, taller than my waist, and they were triggered to be starting to bloom in the fall. So no matter what plant we're talking about, most of them, unless they've been hybridized too much, are triggered by the length of daylight that we have. So, and that's something that I keep in mind too, like even when I'm doing, I'm putting in 100 sunflower plants every single week. It's more than that, but just to put my point across is I need a steady stream of sunflowers, right? But what sunflower should I get? I look at what is the growing time from the time I put it in the tray to the time it's going to bloom. And so if you get a hold of a good, I want to say nursery tag, or there's tons of books out there too that will kind of list out not just the flower characteristic, but what they need for bloom, for bloom time, from the time you put it in your tray to out in your landscape. So Johnny Seeds is something that I love. It's a magazine, and it will sell annuals, perennials, they sell trees, but every seed packet that comes from Johnny Seeds, it goes in depth to tell you what temperature your seed tray should be, how many days you need from seeding to bloom. So that's just one of them out there, but that if you find a good seed packet that has in-depth information, I encourage you to stick with it, because there's many different companies that I could purchase from, but they don't give me the information on that seed packet. So there's some of it that I remember from year to year, and I try to take field notes. I always start out good with my field notes, and that's something I encourage you guys to do too. As much as you think you're going to remember something from this season, how it bloomed, how it was affected by a wet season, a dry season, I always forget that. I'm like, I know there was something I was going to remember about this rose plant. What was it? So unless I put it down in my field notes or just a regular notebook, you can call it your garden notes, I encourage everyone to take garden notes and kind of look back on it. Every year, even weather is different, so it might act different from one year to the next too. So go back to, see how I go down the rabbit holes? That is not intentional. My thoughts just keep flowing here, guys. But back to the fall is all of our layering of plants, and then what I was starting with there is the daylight. So naturally, a lot of these varieties, whether it's spring, summer, fall, they are triggered by our day length. So I believe summer hits, well, we just had spring, so we're not to our longest day yet, clearly. I believe summer is like June 22nd or something. So summer solstice is like the longest daylight we're going to have all year round. From that point going forward, our days start getting shorter. I know we don't think about shorter days starting at the end of June. None of us think that, but really if we were looking at the calendar, that's what's happening. And so our day length affects our plants and our bloom time completely. So if you want to dig into it a little bit farther, we can always research plants too. But I think I talked about trees, I talked about bushes. Layering your landscaping for year-round interest is what I found to be the easiest. Thank you, Tim. You know, this worked out so perfect. I'm probably coming up to that. So evergreen, boxwood, pine, spruce, those are the bigger things that you have in the background that will bring year-round interest. Then we're going to come in with either our taller annuals, our taller perennials. We're going to look at bloom time. We're going to look at hardiness. We're going to look at the height of our plant. So grasses create great interest, and dogwood too. I always had a few red and yellow dogwoods. So even when their leaves dropped, their branches would, you know, create this great color even after we get our first snow. So if you're looking for colorful branches, bare branches that would be there all winter long, that is something too that helps add interest in the winter time. And our grasses, so they basically look all dead, you know, it's snowing out, but it still adds texture as it's displaying in that 10-foot section that maybe you're working on. So raised beds. Maybe gardening just along the fence and putting everything in the ground is not an option for you. Maybe raised beds is something you want to move towards. They're definitely easier on the body, no doubt about that. So raised beds is always an option, even if you start out with a small one, or part of that 10-foot stretch can be raised beds. I think it's easier to control the soil environment in that raised bed, but it also comes with some pros and cons as well. Mixed containers, I think we already mentioned that. You can always move your flower pots around. So you moved your pale blue pot over to where the tulips were until your perennials started blooming, and now your perennials are blooming. We can take that pot and like maybe move it over to your entryway now, where something else may not be. Like maybe there was a spring flowering bush by your entryway, but now those blooms are gone. It's still green and beautiful, but you want a little bit more interest. So take that pale blue pot and move it over next to that spring flowering bush that is all green right now. So lots of options, moving things around. Change is good. It's one season to the next and it's 1 year to the next. So if you want consistency in your landscape, you definitely can have it. But if you're starting from scratch, it's going to take a while. It's going to take a couple of years to get those plants established, even if it is mostly, maybe it's a hardwood, maybe it's an evergreen, moving into maybe it's a perennial that takes a couple of years for that root system to be developed. Another thing I wanted to mention too is change is always going to happen, whether it's a tree that's getting larger. Maybe it was sunny and now the tree is getting larger and now it's mostly shade in that area. Don't be afraid to move your plants around to wherever they're going to be the most happy and thriving. So my maple tree is now grown up and I have shade all around it. So I want to move my perennials. I'm going to tell you, you can move them any time of year, but the best time of year to move your perennials is in the fall. So they've had a chance to go through their growing season, they've bloomed, it's cooling off, the days are getting shorter, they're going back into their dormant stage. Now is a good time to either lift them up and move them away from that shaded area, or maybe it's not a shaded area and they're just getting too big and they're overwhelming that specific area, to divide them. So the fall is a good time to do that as well. Or even put them in pots until next spring and take them to the plant swap, because I like a good plant swap myself. Vertical gardens. I guess vertical gardens is maybe a term I don't want to use. What I mean to say is like vertical interest. So you have the short taken care of, you have the medium taken care of, but there's really nothing in the back. What should I do in the back? Maybe until something, a plant or a shrub gets developed, you can throw a trellis in the back. Whether it's an annual that spreads really fast, like maybe a scarlet runner bean that will go up the trellis really fast and create beautiful purple blooms that same summer. And then have maybe a perennial vine getting established while those annuals are filling it with color. So a good perennial one is the clematis. I love clematis, and I feel like they produce and get developed pretty fast anyway. So think about, you can go vertical. You can go with your pots being moved around as things are blooming and things are coming out of their bloom period. Let's see, I'm going to touch a little bit on mulching. I think I kind of went over that. There's definitely different types of mulching, whether it's just your mowed grass clippings that you collect and put on there. Our main goal is keep the weeds down. Nobody likes weeding for hours and hours, do they? I mean, it can be therapeutic, but nobody likes doing the weeding so often and a long time in one afternoon. Let's take a whole afternoon and weed. So mulching, grass clippings, maybe you have a bale of straw from last fall. I put out decorations and I have this bale of straw. What am I going to do with it now? I encourage you to break it apart, put it out in that 10-foot area. Just different things to keep building that soil. Deadheading and pruning, a whole other subject itself, but in general, there's a lot of annual varieties that you can put in your landscape to create big color that same year, and a lot of them are considered cut and come again. So the deadheading is where you come in and you take off that spent bloom, which will trigger that plant to create more fresh blooms. So cut and come again goes right along with deadheading. If you have a 10-foot section, that's already a big amount of plants to do. But I encourage you to go out there and do at least some of your patch to deadhead and keep that fresh, the fresh blooms coming. And then the only other one I wanted to touch on before Tim cuts me off here is winter protection. And I think I might have said a little bit about it, but yeah, Zone 5 always has its challenges, whether you're up on a ridge or down in the valley. We have had minus 50 on some of these winters, and not that that lasts all that long, but I'm going to guess here, but I want to say it was about 6 years ago, we had minus 50 for 2 or 3 days in a row, and the next spring, lo and behold, there was a whole big group of us that was our burning bushes are not coming back. They're dead. I don't know if anybody here has experienced that. Or maybe they saw that their burning bush was not coming back, but didn't realize that it might have been because of that extreme winter temperatures that we had. So things are changing. Things can change every year. If you have some shrubs or perennials that you're worried about, I encourage you to put some winter protection on them, whether it's a big tub going over it or you have maybe a roll of burlap you can get from your local nursery. Go ahead and wrap some things. Give it just another layer of protection. So, okay, I will open the floor up. I mean, there's lots more to talk about. I could geek out about plants all day long, guys, but I'm hoping I inspired at least a few of you to get started and make a landscape.
You talked about neem oil as a preventative. So tell me how you would do that.
Yep. And I'm sure you can get neem oil maybe in different strengths. But we do a 1-to-1 ratio with neem oil and water. Even if you had a 3-gallon sprayer, mix it up, spray it on your plants. We have, most of our cut flowers are annuals. And a lot of those annuals draw in, especially those Japanese beetles. And we all know that when those Japanese beetles are hungry and they start eating, they can decimate a whole 10-foot section in like an hour. And there's certain crops that they are drawn to. And so for us, it's our zinnias, marigolds, sunflowers. And so we just learn over the years which ones they are drawn to. Maybe it's your roses, maybe it's the top of your crabapple tree, which is also very hard to treat. But yeah, the neem oil, 1-to-1 ratio, neem oil and water, even in a 3-gallon sprayer. A lot of times you can look that up and find like where you can get the neem oil. For us, we just order it from one of our suppliers. It's also in a catalog that offers like weed barrier landscaping supplies.
And you do it on the bed itself, or?
We put it right on the foliage. We spray the plants. Yep, so the smell of it is really off-putting for a lot of insects, or when they start eating the leaf, the taste of it is, and that's again, if we put it on there and then it hasn't rained for 4 days, that would be ideal. But if we get a rain the next day or we get some of these heavy dews, you'll have to apply it again. So.
Yeah, I have a question. I have a lot of powdery mildew on certain plants, like my phlox and razor phlox and bee balm and stuff. So would using that neem oil before all this happens help?
So the neem oil is not going to prevent powdery mildew. A couple things come to my mind when I first think of powdery mildew is how much sunlight are those plants getting? Maybe they need a little bit more. And then how closely have those plants become? I know both of those varieties are really natural, like good naturalizers. They multiply and their sections get big and dense pretty fast, the phlox and the bee balm. So maybe it's that they're not getting enough airflow. So maybe you do need to divide some of your sections. But there is see if I'm going to say this right, an antifungal that will treat powdery mildew if it's already present. And I want to say, gosh, you guys, I'm going to sound like a fool right now, but I think it's like microchromial, something, I'll have to look it up. Did I make myself a fool right now? But there is a product out there that will treat powdery mildew if it's already present on your leaves. If you can catch it at an earlier stage, the better. Because if your whole leaf is already covered with that powder, the spores multiply like crazy. By the time you see it, it might already be too late. But to be proactive with the powdery mildew, definitely look at your conditions. It's most likely a little too shady for that variety or not enough airflow.
You said you had a lot of tulips. What, do you have a problem with deer? What do you do about deer?
So we used to, when we were planting in Mount Hope Township, we had a ton of deer pressure. And I tried everything. There's sprays out there. There's powders out there. I was even asking my hairdresser to save anything she swept off her floor. She gave me a big bag of human hair and I spread it around. I have read every method, and the only thing that has proven to be foolproof for those deer coming in super hungry and take out so many tulips at a time is an electric fence. And clearly a lot of us in town here are not going to have the option to do electric fence. But in my case, when a lot of these tulips were already sold, and I come in checking things out for the day, and I'm like, oh my gosh, a whole 4x10 bed gone. It's heartbreaking, not only on your wallet, but those are orders. The flowers they might spring back. At that point, it was pretty early in the year, but they're not going to be the same. So we never had electricity down in that area, so for us it was a solar-powered electric fence. And then we kept it up actually in that same area. We would do real early successions of sunflowers, direct seed in April even for some of them. My goal is always to have the first sunflowers at the market. So that's also something that the deer are very drawn to, are the sunflowers. So we kept the electric fence up and we put our first succession of sunflowers in there to protect them as well.
What do you do with all those tulip bulbs?
Yes.
Are they planted that closely?
They are.
So when you...
So we, as a cut flower farmer, we pull the entire bulb and everything when we harvest. So we harvest at color bud, which is the very first crack of color. You don't know what the bud's going to be. All the buds are pure green until you see just the crack of color. So that's when we want to pull them out of our field for our bouquet subscriptions, for our wholesale accounts and the market. For Tulip Fest, of course, I'm going to let them bloom for you guys. So we're gonna have different sections for different things. But, so when we harvest them, the whole bulb, everything gets taken out of the ground. That means the food source is left on that flower. From that point, they get taken into our cooler. So about 35, 40 degrees, which also slows down their bloom time. So what I'm looking for as a cut flower farmer is base life. When I cut that bulb off, the base life starts. That's when I have a little window to give that to my customer, and then for my customer to enjoy a week and a half of base life. That's my goal.
What do you do with the leftover bulbs?
Yeah, so we compost those bulbs. And the reason being, I know, you're like, oh my gosh, money, why are you composting the bulbs? So what I had mentioned on before is that bulb does not have a chance to regenerate for the next year. If I cut that bulb off and plant it, it may very well shoot up a couple leaves, but it doesn't have enough energy to produce a new flower for the following year. We've experimented. I read it, I studied it, we experimented, it's true. My father-in-law or some of my neighbors are like, can I come and get some? I'm like, help yourselves, but unfortunately it's not going to produce flowers.
And you want to deadhead jonquils and daffodils like you do tulip leaves?
Yes, but the daffodils are good naturalizers even if you don't do that. They seem to develop more of the baby bulbs around there, even when you don't cut off that energy supply. Versus tulips, and I believe it's more of a hybridizing thing that has happened. The tulips are more hybridized than any of our daffodils have been. And so daffodils they're so good at naturalizing. So I wouldn't be as worried about them as I am with the tulips.
So I bought tulips last fall, and we have a tree line and lots of deer and everything. But the tulips that I bought said deer-resistant tulips. Is there such a thing? Or
Not in my mind, unless they not my experience. They got you. So unless, the only thing I can think of is unless they treated that bulb with some kind of deterrent. Like maybe they put a powder on it or something like that that was going to try to keep the scent of it was going to try to keep them away. But naturally, no.
Okay.
Sorry. I wish there was.
If you had a fresh spot that you're starting that's currently just grass in your yard, can you run through like a quick process of the best way to kind of start a healthy area?
So a lot of people will say, well, come in and just spray the grass and get rid of it. I really would say no. Once you have, I'm going to say the worst word right now, but something like Roundup, it kills a lot of the good stuff in the soil too. So I really am against anything like that. This is going to sound complicated, but if you have access to rent a sod cutter, that might be some of the best options. If it's a perennial grass, come in with a sod cutter and get that out of the way. Then take your soil test. See what that soil is looking like. And again, mention it to whoever's testing your soil, if it's the extension or somebody who does just the soil testing. Let them know what you're going to plant there, because then that's how they will give back your results. Right? This is what you need to add to it. And then just keep adding compost, and this is through the years. Like you have maybe a tree on the edge of your yard, and all of us are in the habit of, let's just clean up the yard. It's a beautiful fall day. Let's break up all those leaves and get them out of there. Leaves are liquid gold. If anyone can stand to leave their leaves on their yard, please do so. It's great for your soil, or move them over to just your garden bed. It's the best thing for it.
And on that note, the cowbell hasn't rung yet, but it's getting very close. So, first of all, thank you all again for being here for this. Secondly, thank you, Sally. Great presentation. I am going to plug her. If you keep your eye on some of the events in the area, she does workshops all over the place. And varieties are incredible what she actually does. So the porch pots and different things like that are always fun. So again, thank you, Sally, for being here.
Well, thank you all for coming.
At least during the day.
You could even have a park out there. Say a month, cardboard, something, and you could naturally peel off what's going on. So